Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. Lawrence?
You can call it the DCU, the SnyderVerse, or whatever you like. But the fact remains, after a decade and 15 films, this cinematic universe featuring DC heroes was largely a failure. While there were standout moments such as Superman's first flight and Man of Steel, many films like Suicide Squad, Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman 84, and even 2017's Justice League were something that left audiences frustrated. When successful, the films hit the mark with excellent casting of characters like Superman and Batman. However, missteps with actors such as Jared Leto, Jesse Eisenberg, Zachary Levi, and Ezra Miller contributed to growing dissatisfaction. Internally, conflict brewed at Warner Brothers as producers Jeff Johns, John Berg pursued one vision, while director Zack Snyder sought another. Upper management focused on capitalizing on the lucrative comic book movie trend that Marvel Studios had made so popular and paid little attention to the creative discord. Compromises were made, artistic visions were stifled, and films underwent significant alterations in hopes of financial success. Filmmakers struggled to develop coherent scripts, and the outlook seemed grim. Tragedy struck when Zack Snyder stepped away to take care of his family after the loss of his daughter. Warner Brothers hastily appointed director Josh Whedon to finish Justice League, resulting in a film that was nearly unrecognizable. This marked a pivotal turning point for the DCEU. After Justice League's release, Warner Brothers was sold to AT&T, leading to new leadership and a mixed slate of films. In 2020, amid the pandemic, Warner Brothers AT&T released films simultaneously in theaters and on streaming, starting with Wonder Woman 84, which disappointed fans due to its weak script and poor visual effects. However, the demand for Zack Snyder's original vision grew, and in 2021, his cut of Justice League was released to positive reception. However, the studio had already begun plans to move forward without him. As the DCEU had a few films left to release, Warner Brothers merged with Discovery, becoming Warner Brothers Discovery. Amid this transition, fans hoped for a brighter future and possibly Snyder's return. While some films were well received, broader audience engagement declined and box office returns reflected that the DCEU was effectively done. Ultimately, David Zaslav, the new head of Warner Brothers Discovery, decided to create a new division of DC Films, DC Studios, and brought on James Gunn and Peter Safran to help make the tough decision to start fresh. So that's kind of where I wanted to start. I wanted to lay it all out there in broad terms. This is kind of broad strokes, I should say, of the start of the DCEU all the way to where we're at today. It was an interesting journey. It has been a crazy journey to how we started in 2013 with such an amazing film like Man of Steel. Man of Steel was a fantastic film. I look, to this day, I hold it up to such high esteem. It is, in my opinion, the quintessential Superman film. It is quite possibly the quintessential origin movie in my eyes. Again, it's my opinion. Everybody has their own opinions. That's what's great about film. It's all subjective. But the way the DCEU started, it started off with a bang, in my opinion. But to see that it started off here and then it's slow, and it was a slow demise, is absolutely wild to me. There are a couple comments. Matthew Gaudette, I like Henry Cavill and Man of Steel. I will always be grateful for it. And I am with you on that, my man. Man of Steel was phenomenal. It was a phenomenal film. I love it so much. So much. It is such a great movie. It's one of those films that when I have a chance to go back to it, I go back to it. It has so much heart. It has so much beauty in that movie. And the one thing I know some people may look at me and think I'm a bit crazy. I don't know if you guys remember the show that was on the internet around the time of everything going on in 2020, 2021 called Lightcast Podcast. You may not. But there was a gentleman on there. His name was Matt. And he said something to me the one time that stuck with me. And I never looked at Man of Steel this way. But Man of Steel is not a Superman movie. Man of Steel is a Clark Kent movie. It's a Clark Kent movie that builds to becoming a Superman movie. And when you sit back and look at it that way, you start to understand that, holy crap, this movie, that's what makes it such a great origin film, because it is the story of Clark Kent becoming Superman. And that is why it is such a good origin film, because they focus on that so much. And I think that's what turns so many people off from it, that are turned off from it, because they wanted to go in there and just see a Superman movie. And that's not what it was. And that's always stuck with me. Prior to that, I remember going to the theater in 2013 to see it. I fell in love with it right away. It was a beautiful film. And I fell in love with it for what it was. But it wasn't until 2020 when Matt told me that I was just like, holy crap. It like opened up my eyes, and I was like, that's wild. To look at it that way, to see it from that perspective is just wild. It's wild, because then you sit back, you're like, holy crap, that is exactly what that movie is. It's just wild to me. What else does Matt say? I like Keaton and Supergirl and The Flash. I liked Aquaman 1 and Shazam 1. So many bad movies in the post-Justice League era, though. So many flops. And we're going to get through it, man. We're going to get through this together and understand what happened to the DCEU and how we got to where we are today. That's the point of this show. That's the point of this specific podcast, this episode. Man of Steel, Matt says, Man of Steel liked the sci-fi mythology and Superman being an alien living amongst humanity and becoming our champion. But that's the story of Superman. It's always been the story of Superman. It's always been the beauty of Superman. There's always been something about that story that's been so grand. I mean, it goes back even to biblical times. Superman is very much borrowed from the story of Superman is borrowed very much so from the story of Moses. Even I did a video. I'm a religious person to a large degree, and I do some videos and some things where I call pop culture in the Bible, and I related Superman, specifically Zack Snyder's Superman, to the Bible. And when you take a look at things, you see the connections of Superman and Moses in that story, as well as Superman and Jesus Christ as well. But the story of Moses and Superman is very similar. And that's just the beauty of Superman. There is a beauty of the Superman story for sure. And let's see, Critic Chris, what's going on? I preferred Nolan's idea of not killing Zod. Snyder could have brought the villain back for a rematch. There's a lot of people that don't like the killing of Zod. It never bothered me, because I understand at that moment you have to have Superman make a choice, number one. Number two, at that point in time, that's where Superman decides, like, I killed the only person that could have taught me everything I could have known about where I come from. And in killing him, I had to do something that I never thought I could do or should do. And from that point forward, he doesn't ever want to do it again. The problem with that scene, though, is you don't see that development down the line again. You don't see that character development in another movie. That's the important step, because the next movie just takes it completely somewhere else, otherworldly, which is fine, but you then kind of miss the inner battle that Clark and Superman and that he has from that moment. You don't see that inner battle that he would have ever from that specific event and moment. Critic Chris also says, thing I hate in Man of Steel was Jonathan Kent encouraging Clark to let kids drown to conceal his abilities. Mr. Kent would never say that. Again, this is where we could go back and forth on Man of Steel, and this is not the point of this podcast. This specific episode, I don't want to go back and forth on things here, because for me, I get what people say and why they say that. I look at it as more of a father myself. I am a father of 6 kids. My fiance and I, we have 6 kids together. It's a blended family, but we have 6 kids. And I can see as a father of not wanting to share your children with the world. It's specifically a child who has abilities like that. Not just sharing him with the world, but in that case, because of those abilities, being afraid of what that could mean to the world and how the world would then treat him, you, and everything else. Jonathan Kent was basically making a point to say, look, if he wasn't there, if Clark wasn't there, if he did not have those abilities, those kids would have died. Yes, he was there. And yes, he did save them. But in Jonathan's eyes, there's a risk there. So, it's a battle that even the Kents had to face, which is a real world type of battle. This wasn't the aw shucks gee golly of the 50s and 60s. This was a real world 90s, 2000s type of Superman film, or Clark Kent, and just that's how it was, and that's what I appreciated about it. Matthew says, I grew up with Reeve as Superman. It's hard to follow that when almost everyone judges cinematic Superman based on Donner. Again, I love the Reeve films. I do. I think Christopher Reeve was a fantastic Superman. I watched them so many times growing up. Nothing takes away from those. I even like the Brandon Routh Superman Returns movie. Look, I get there was no punches thrown. I like it for what it is. I like that it's a continuation that what Christopher Reeve was doing. I think it's a good movie in its own right, to a point. You can like everything. You can like different things. It's okay. Tio Jones, what's going on, my man? Zack Snyder is great visually, but he also has his flaws. He could be too serious, but then again, James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy are not the same as the comic counterparts. Likewise with Zack's Soups. Yes, you're right, and that's okay. The one thing that people don't understand, and this is this discussion and debate that happens all the time. You have a comic run. We'll take Superman, for instance, because we're talking about Superman. You have a comic run about Superman. That run can go for 10 issues, 15 issues, 20 issues, 30 issues, whatever issues. And then you get a new writer. And then it's a new run. But it's written differently. You get a new artist. It's drawn differently. It looks different. It's a different vision. It's a different idea of how the character is written and portrayed and shown. It happens in comics all the time. You don't want the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Because if you do that, it gets boring. So when it makes the jump from the page to the screen, yeah, it should do pretty much the same thing. You should make that jump from page to screen and allow the filmmaker, the director, to make their own little changes and put their own twist and vision on the characters. That's fine. As long as you don't fundamentally change the core of the character, which I don't think James Gunn nor Zack Snyder has ever done. Sure, they may be a little goofier, they may be a little more serious, they may be a little more stern, they may be whatever. But down to the nitty-gritty of the character, the core of them are still there in those films. Anyway, so we got Man of Steel in 2013, and I tell you what, it was an amazing time. But the problem with that was the reception was mediocre. I mean, the box office was $670 million, which was pretty good for that time. It wasn't terrible by any means. It's the first movie of a franchise. It was good. But the Rotten Tomatoes score was 56% critics. Critics weren't raving about it. And the audience score was a respectable 75%. Again, respectable. It wasn't terrible. It was respectable. That's good. But quickly, I mean, we're talking about quickly. This came out in 2013, June 2013. And very, very quickly, we got this. Let me move this out of the way. We got this.
To remember, Clark, in all the years to come, in all your most private moments, I want you to remember.
This was just a little more than a month later.
Throat. I want you to remember the one man who beat you.
Whoa! What? What? What?
The fans, as you can hear, went absolutely wild. The fans went crazy at Comic-Con. Now, obviously, I always say this when it's a Comic-Con, when it's an event like this, people are going to go crazy. People go crazy. People go crazy. People get excited. It's the environment that you're in. But we were getting a Batman vs. Superman movie. Well, World's Finest, as you heard, people were thinking it was what it was going to be called. And it was wild. People were, this is insane. This is what we're going to get? Like, no way. That's crazy. And think about it. Like, honestly, think about it for a minute. Let me pull this back up. I got to pull it back up. Because when this happened, like, we were going from Man of Steel, which was doing well at the theater, at the box office. It wasn't doing gangbusters, like I said. It was doing well. But this was just a little over a month after the film came out and they announced this. We had no idea who was going to be Batman. We didn't know what the movie was necessarily going to be about. We honestly just heard that, so we thought it was going to be Batman against Superman in some form or fashion. People thought it was going to be The Dark Knight Returns at first. We really didn't know what it was going to be. So people were going crazy about this. So that's what was nuts. And it wasn't until, that was at 2013. It wasn't until, October of 2014, where we got a slate of a total of 10 movies, 10 films that were going to be released. This was announced by Warner Brothers at the time. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, Suicide Squad by David Ayer, Wonder Woman by Patty Jenkins, Part 1 of Justice League, a Flash movie, Aquaman, Shazam, Part 2 of Justice League, Cyborg, and Green Lantern Corps. I can't talk. This is what was announced in October of 2014. So October of 2014, we're talking 10 years ago at this point. About 10 years ago, this is what was announced for the DCEU. Just think about that for a second. We started with Man of Steel. A year and some change later, this was the announced lineup. What do you think we were going to get? This was their answer to Marvel. This is what their answer to Marvel was. We got some more comments here. Matthew Goddard says, people act like Zach was ruining something sacred when the Silver Age is what all the TV shows and movies have done, but the comics have done more dark and more modern takes. Correct, Hunter Iggy. What's going on, my man? Matthew, what's up? And do you think we will reference the other superheroes that did not show up yet? Critic Chris, loved how Krypton looked over the ice planet in Reeve films. Matthew, Dark Knight Returns is great. It's also a comic never realized on film. Correct. Critic Chris, I liked Batman v Superman first seeing it, but after the third viewing was more meh. Jesse's version of Lex makes me cringe. He was more Mad Hatter than Lex. Anyways, so we get this. This is 2016. It's wild. Now, SDCC 2013, we get the announcement of BVS. BVS comes out in March of 2016. But prior to that, we get this. And then we get this little DC Films presents The Dawn of the Justice League. And this is where I think this was January of 2016. And I remember sitting there because this was before, I think it was before The Flash or right after The Flash TV show was on. I was a big Flash fan on the CW because this was on the CW. I was real excited. But this was hosted by Kevin Smith and Jeff Johns. And everybody was like, okay, this is going to be interesting because they're going to show us some stuff, right? We're going to see some stuff here. Well, we got a taste of Suicide Squad. We got a little shot of, Deadshot's mask. We got Katana's sword. We got Harley Quinn's bat there. And Jeff Johns talked a little more about what the plans were for the DCEU at the time. This was really Jeff Johns' coming out party of like, I'm in charge of the DCEU here. This was him basically like, I am the Kevin Feige of the DCEU. Little did we know this was sort of the downfall, the real start of the downfall. Because at this point, I remember reading articles about terrible audience test audiences for Batman v Superman. I remember reading terrible articles about Batman v Superman because this was just a few months before it came out. And again, a lot of the rumors were that this was all stemming from Jeff Johns. How true is that? What's the facts behind that? I don't think we're ever going to know the actual truth. But there's rumors that Jeff Johns leaked a lot of what Zack Snyder was doing to Kevin Feige, to Marvel Studios, and eventually some of those story beats got put into what Marvel was planning and what they did with Endgame and Infinity War. It's wild stuff. It is absolutely wild stuff. But that means for 16 months from the time that we were told in October of 2014, we got nothing. I mean, just think 2014. So 2013, we get Man of Steel. We don't get anything until 2016, essentially. That's a long period of just nothingness. Nothingness. And 2016, that's when all the fun starts, right? All the fun starts there. At least that's what we think. So, in that time frame, we get Batman v Superman, 29% critic score, 63% audience score, which isn't terrible. And I know people don't like to talk about Rotten Tomatoes. I get it. I understand. But we could even go here. Now, this is domestically, but Batman v Superman domestically only made $330 million. But if we take a look at it worldwide, $874 million. That is very, very admirable. That is very well. I will never say that Batman v Superman failed financially. It did not fail financially. Don't ever say that I said that because I will never say it failed financially. But it did not meet the expectations of what Warner Brothers wanted. It didn't meet the expectations of what fans expected either because it should have done gangbusters. The first movie in live action with Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman. Come on now. Easy $1 billion, you would think. Easy $1 billion plus. And it didn't do that. Why? Well, the story was a little... And I'm going to be honest here. I went to the theater and I was not a fan of what we saw in that theater. I walked out of that theater and was not a fan. It wasn't until I saw the Ultimate Edition that I actually was like, okay, this movie's decent. But it did not do well. It didn't. Plain and simple. It just did not do well. We go to Suicide Squad, and yes, it won an Oscar for costumes, but it was horrible. That movie is bad. Don't let anybody try and trick you and say it's good. It's not good. 26% critic, 58% audience score. Sure, it made $700 million in the theater somehow. Nope, that's the Suicide Squad. Wrong one. Where's it at here? There it is. $750 million. That was all international. I know it's actually kind of split. I mean, that's, I don't know how. I still don't understand that. It was in the middle of the superhero boom. That's the only thing I can think of, because it's not a good film. Sure, I would love to see David Ayer's cut. Absolutely. Probably not going to get to, but it is what it is. Then we get Wonder Woman, which was huge. It was a damn good movie. The third act kind of struggled. And then we get Justice League. And we all know that. We all know what happened there. And what I'm getting at here, okay, is, and I'm just highlighting the inconsistencies of the DCEU. All right. It was just all over the place. When you take a look at what was going on at that time with the superhero genre, with the comic book movie boom, I call it the comic book movie genre boom because that's what it was. It was a huge boom at the time. When you take a look at what was going on there, you weren't seeing films that were like this from the other studio. You weren't seeing films that were going from one film that was highly rated, highly regarded, and high box office to a film that was terribly rated, terribly criticized, low box office. You weren't seeing that, but that's what you were seeing from the DCEU. And then you also weren't seeing high box office, terribly rated from the MCU. You were seeing consistency from the MCU. And there was a big disconnect from what the audience wanted and what was going on at the DCEU and Warner Brothers. Whether right or wrong, there was a disconnect. And you as a fan, you may sit there and say, well, I love what they were doing, and shame on Warner Brothers for doing what they were doing. I agree. What Warner Brothers was doing was ridiculous. How they backstabbed Zach, how they went behind his back, and how they treated the cast. I agree. You can't sit there and say otherwise. Nobody can sit there and say how they handled all that was right, because it wasn't. What John Bergs, Jeff Johns did, what Josh Whedon did, how that was all handled was wrong. There's no denying that. But what they did was they destroyed the DCU. The quality and the audience appeal was destroyed during that time. And you see that because you see the audience. You don't even need to look at the critic scores. You see the audience scores. And you see the box office. And you look at those. And there was just no consistency going on. And that's a problem. That is a huge, huge problem. Let's head over back to the comments. Let's see. What was the last one I looked at? Dark Knight Returns is great. It's also a comic never realized. I saw that one already. Matthew says, whoa, how did it get way up there? Why did it do that? There we go, that one. I would probably watch Justice League 2 or Man of Steel 2. This is what Matthew says, but they will never happen. I'm glad we are started fresh, but feel bad what they did to Henry, but he's a professional and knows how it works. And that's a very, very, very big point that people need to point out. That, yes, Henry is professional. He understands what happened there. We're going to get into that here in a moment, in a little bit, what happened to Henry Cavill, because that is a big part of the story, is what happened to Henry Cavill. It's a very big part. Man of Steel, Mangolias. Jesse Lex was terrible. Look, I didn't mind him. He wasn't great, but I didn't mind him. Matthew says, I still want Affleck Batman movie. I think people were horrible to him. Agree? Critic Chris, I agree about Suicide Squad having good costumes, but overall fell flat. Matthew says, the Whedon cut is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. The Snyder cut was not great, but it very good. Tito Jones, Snyder Cut was trash like Whedon's. Both trash. One is just overhyped. Jeez. Tell me how you really feel. Critic Chris, I didn't like both Justice League films. Snyder Cut was overly too long. To release a 4-hour movie in theaters, it's just not going to make much money given limited screenings it would have. And Matthew says, my problem with Snyder Cut is it's more of a miniseries and not cinematic as it in too long. And talking about the Snyder Cut, you're right. Look, I enjoy the Snyder Cut. I think it is a vastly better movie than what we got in 2017. Vastly better movie. But the fact of the matter is this. Snyder, way too much slow motion in that movie. The amount of slow motion that's in that movie, you could take 80% of the slow motion out of that film and probably save 30, 40 minutes. So you're down to like 3 hours and 20 minutes. Boom, there you go. And then there are some story elements that just bog the movie down that you don't need. You could probably make that movie 2 hours, 40 minutes, 3 hours, easy. And it would be a much tighter movie, a much more enjoyable film. I've gone back. I've probably watched it 4 or 5 times total, start to finish. I don't find myself going back to watch it start to finish. I've gone and watched from like the end, the big battle. I've watched bits and pieces. I'll pull pieces of the movie out and watch those, but it's not a movie that I can sit down and watch start to finish. Like you guys said, it's 4 hours. It's way too long, and it's just too much. It is far too much. It's also one of Junkie XL's worst musically, because there's a lot of repeated scores throughout that movie, but when it's 4 hours, that's a lot of time to fill for music. And that's tough for a composer. Like 4 hours is a lot of time to fill for music. So I don't blame him. That's a lot of time. I mean, don't get me wrong, Rebel Moon's probably his worst for music, but that's a lot of time to fill for music. It really is. But yeah, 2017 Justice League is trash. I tried to cope and make it like it was good in my head for a while. I really did, but it is trash. There is a bit of it that I enjoyed only because it was so reminiscent of Justice League War. Was the beginning part of that movie where Batman fights a parademon on the roof. It is very similar to Justice League War, which I liked. Not perfect, not exact, but it was just kind of like, that's a cool little homage to animated film that I like. That was pretty much it. That's the only part of the movie that I'm like, hey, I kind of like that. Besides that, it is a pretty bad film. It really is. Let's see. Matthew says the one character that improved way more was Cyborg. If you're talking about in the Snyder Cut, you're exactly right. Aziel, how's it going, my man? One of the things I have loved from James Gunn DC and shows in DCEU are the suits. Not only bright and classic, they have details. My favorites on the DCEU were Dr. Fate, Peacemaker, and Aquaman. That's another thing that people didn't like about the DCEU were the suits. You're right. That's something I actually didn't have in my notes here is suits were kind of rough with the DCU. The ones that stood out the most were the brighter ones, were the ones that were more in line with, and people are going to get mad at this, but how Marvel handled suits. They were brighter, they're more vibrant, they're more comic booky. People didn't like the Man of Steel suit. People didn't like the BVS suit, even though the BVS suit to me is, I think, the best Superman suit in that era. But people didn't like that suit. People wanted more bright, more vibrant. Even the Ben Affleck suits for Batman, they didn't like them. They wanted more bright and vibrant. And that's what they were doing. They were trying to get them more bright and vibrant as each movie went on. So you're not wrong. Like people didn't like the suits. Critic Chris agrees with him. Matthew got out. You had the death and resurrection of Superman, and then they killed the series. That kind of sucks. Man of Steel Mangolia says, would you leave in the part where the girl cringe smells Aquaman sweater? That was a weird part. That's some weird Zack Snyder-ness there. Matthew says, I love Snyder or Cavill Superman suit, not underwear on the outside. The underwear on the outside has never bothered me about a Superman suit. I don't know why that bothers so many people. The thing that bothers me about a Superman suit is the stupid S on the cape. I don't know why that bothers me. That's going to bother me. That's actually the one thing that bothers me about James Gunn's Superman is that the S is on the cape. I think it looks like a Halloween costume. It just bothers me to no end. It bothered me with the Reeves suits. It bothers me to no end when there's an S on the cape. Like I said, it just makes me think of a Halloween costume. I don't know why. It just does. Critic Chris, I've seen drawings of Cavill in a more modern Reeves Superman, not tights. All right. So continuing. I got to continue on here. So from that point on, you know, we got through the BVS of things, the Justice League of things. You know, Josh Whedon was brought in after Zack Snyder had to leave. All this backstabbing went on. They were trying to change BVS. They were then trying to change Justice League. Zack promised to make Justice League more lighthearted. He was going to tone it down, but then tragedy struck and he had to leave. Now, during that time, they already brought Josh Whedon in to do some rewrites for Batman v Superman, for Justice League. They brought Josh Whedon in for rewrites of Justice League that they were going to do pickups on, reshoots for. So when tragedy struck the Snyders, Snyder left, they just brought Josh Whedon in to finish the film. And well, we saw the abomination that it became. Warner Brothers at the time was going through a sale to AT&T. This was going to be their last big film. Instead of just delaying the movie and saying, you know what, let's delay it, let's push it until 2018, 2019, they rushed it out. They wanted to get it out there. That way they could get their bonus. That is what the executives wanted. They just wanted to get their bonus, so they rushed it out there. They did a half-assed job, and that's what we got. But in the meantime, during all of this, you then find out the stories of, you know, Jeff Johns, John Berg, and Josh Whedon mistreating the cast as they did. Now, I will sit here and support the cast. I will not sit here and say that the cast are wrong for standing up for themselves. The cast was not wrong to come out and speak up. They 100% should come out and speak up. But the way that Ray Fisher weaponized the fandom after the announcement of Zack Snyder's Justice League in 2020, the way that Ray Fisher came out and weaponized the fandom, in my eyes, is what truly started the fandom to turn and become extremely toxic. It really is. Because from 2017, from the time that Justice League came out to May 2020, when Zack Snyder said, this is real, this is happening, Zack Snyder's Justice League is going to come out. From that 17 to 2020, sure, you had your bad eggs. You had those people who were there toxic and saying things that they shouldn't have been saying, acting mean towards Warner Brothers, what have you. You had those bad eggs. But for the most part, it was an honorable movement. It was a respectful movement that just wanted to see a director's cut of a movie. And they did what they could. But up to this point, it was just a fun time. Like, I was part of that movement. I was part of the release the Snyder Cut movement. I had fun. I did interviews with people. It was a great time. I sat there at my computer watching the watch along, hoping that there was going to be an announcement. I was there. It was exciting. It was so much fun. It was a great time. I mean, especially during the pandemic when things were so dire at that time. I was laid off from work at the time. We didn't have much to be excited about. But then that July, just a month or so later, Ray Fisher comes out and says all this stuff. And like I said, 100% support him doing that. 100% support all the actors. Supporting him coming out and talking about the way they were mistreated. 100% support that. But the way that Ray Fisher weaponized the fandom after that was completely uncalled for. And the fandom since then has slowly decayed and become worse. So much worse than what they were, or not than what they were, than what Jeff Johns, John Bergs, and Josh Whedon ever were. It's just what it is. The way they treat James Gunn, the way they treat Peter Safran, the way they treat Warner Brothers now, Warner Brothers Discovery specifically, is uncalled for. And it all stems from the way that they began to be weaponized by Ray Fisher. And it's unfortunate. It's truly unfortunate. Again, I agree wholeheartedly that Ray Fisher should call out Josh Whedon and everything. Wholeheartedly. But he should not have weaponized the fandom. He should not have. All right, where are we at here comments-wise? This one here, I believe. I didn't mind Cavill's costume. This is from critic Chris. Just too dark. Affleck's is nice departure from the armor Batman costumes. Hunter Iggy says, Slabs Free Talk. Any idea if there are going to be reference to other heroes? Are you talking about what exactly, sir? Matthew Gaudette, Marvelizing DC, Zach fans were not pleased. Ain't that the truth? Aziel, I hope I'm saying that right. To me, if the Man of Steel suit had a brighter, like a more electric blue, and the red look red, and maybe the crest to have a golden and the belt was red, it might have been one of the best of the DCEU. Well, there was really no belt on the Man of Steel suit. There was like a little design around the waist, but there was really no belt. And I agree. I still to this day, while I love that movie, Man of Steel is my favorite superhero film to this day. His suit is probably the worst suit in the DCEU. It is not a good suit. It is very muted, very dark. I don't like it. Critic Chris, I honestly never thought they'd have Aquaman in his classic orange-green costume. I knew they'd go with the Conan look, which was fine. Hey, we got the classic orange and green costume, but again, that was much later when they started marvelizing the costumes. You know, they were going for the vibrant and the bright costumes, which is fine. That was an amazing choice by Juan and his designers, also with Ocean Master. They did some great things with Aquaman. They really did. Man of Steel color timed that way to have less prominent reds and blues. It was a choice stylistically. Personally, I prefer the look of Reeve Superman classic look on film. That was from Matthew. Yeah, I like Reeve's Superman classic look. It was a good look, but it was dated. You know, the spandex, very, very, very dated. Let's see. We got Critic Chris. He just agrees with Aziel on Ocean Master. Hunter Iggy, he says in James Gunn's Superman movie. We know that there's going to be heroes, additional heroes in the Superman movie, my man. We know. We've seen the pictures. We know. All right. Caught up on comments, so we're going to move on. So as we saw everything happen, there were then crazy rumors. J.J. Abrams got brought on to be part of Warner Brothers. He got this crazy mega deal with him and Bad Robot, and he was going to do a Justice League Dark film. He was going to start doing DC films, and there was going to be a Constantine movie, a Zatanna movie. They were starting to do all this stuff that eventually never went anywhere. Walter Hamada was then put in place to run DC films. He then started working on the Flash movie, which, remember, was one of the movies that up here was one of the first 10 that were announced. Was never getting made, but it went through multiple directors, multiple writers. They just couldn't figure out what they were doing with this movie. Well, Walter Hamada got there and he started to put it in place. He started making sure that things were going to get done. He wanted this movie. Shazam was already out. Shazam came out, shockingly. Cyborg got pushed to the sidelines, specifically because Cyborg wasn't a character that they really wanted to move forward with. Jeff Johns kind of was pushed to the side, and then all the Ray Fisher stuff happened. Like Cyborg, not going to happen. Green Lanterns never got off the ground. Then it was like, oh, Green Lanterns is going to become a show on HBO Max, and that's going to be run by Berlanti, the guys behind the Flash and the Arrowverse and all that stuff. That's going to be separate. So things were just kind of a mess still. Like nothing was ever put in place. Nothing was ever like, hey, we're going to have this just one universe with DC. Like they just never got things in order. it was just madness. They wanted the money, they wanted the glory that Marvel was having across the street, yet they never sat down and said, let's just put things in order. Let's just make things make sense. Instead of saying, look, we screwed up for 4 or 5 years, let's just start fresh. We know what happened. It sucks. Let's just start fresh. Look, fans were excited when Zack Snyder's Justice League came out in 2021. Absolutely. They were excited. They liked it. They loved it. They wanted more of it. But Walter Hamada was like, look, I'm going to do my own thing, which is fine. That's how it works in Hollywood. That's how it works in studios. They want to do their own thing. They don't want to be beholden to what came before them when they're put in place. So they did Birds of Prey. They did, they made their own version with The Flash. Yes, sure. They kept the characters, the actors, because they were like, well, they're already established. Let's see if people will latch on and keep, stick with them. Ben Affleck left on his own accord. He was having life struggles. He left on his own accord. Henry Cavill, they couldn't get a contract done. Henry Cavill felt that he was worth way more than what Warner Brothers wanted to give him. Look, whether you agree with that or not, it is what it is. Henry Cavill just never became the household name that Henry Cavill believes he is. Warner Brothers understood that. Cavill did not. He never really got a chance to showcase himself as Superman because of that. Whether it was Cavill's management telling him this or it was Cavill himself believing that, who knows? But that is what happened with Cavill. That's why we never saw him again besides a little cameo in Black Adam. So as this stuff was moving forward, Warner Brothers got sold again. Well, kind of. They merged with Discovery. And things started to get crazy because these movies that were coming out just weren't that good. Wonder Woman 84 came out, was atrocious. Flash came out, was meh. It was all right. I mean, it wasn't great. I mean, I didn't hate it, but it was all right. The Suicide Squad was actually really good. People really liked that. It didn't do well in the box office, but that was during the pandemic where they tried to do this release day and dates at the same time, the same day as their theaters. It also didn't release in China. It was a rated R movie. Like there's a whole, thing that why it didn't make money at the box office, but 82% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, 90% critic score. It's a loved movie. People like it. It just didn't make the money at the box office. But it led to a Peacemaker show on HBO Max, which did gangbusters for HBO Max. It was a beloved show. But then we get a Black Adam movie. We get a Shazam movie. Shazam 2, I should say. Neither of which do very well at the box office. Critically, just not very well. Aquaman 2 doesn't do very well. We do get a Blue Beetle that does pretty well. Zolo Moran, however you say his name. He was really good in Blue Beetle. Didn't do great at the box office, but it disconnected itself enough from the DCEU for people to sit back and say, you know what? Maybe there's something here. Maybe we could do something with this. But you see, even with Walter Hamada under there, the fans, I won't say the fans, but the audience, the larger general audience, they were sick of the confusion, the incoherent story, the lack of direction with the DCEU. You had a story that at first seemed like it was about Superman and what was going on with Superman. Then you have Batman v Superman. It was Batman versus Superman and then a big doomsday. Then Wonder Woman comes in. And then you have Steppenwolf come in Justice League. And then at that point, there's no direction. And the audience, what do you expect the audience to do? They're so used to Marvel, where Marvel gives you a direction. And while it's not always like on the nose, Marvel gave you a direction, an idea. The Infinity Saga was like, here's Infinity Stones, here's Infinity Stones. And even if the general audience didn't understand that, you had the fans who were like, oh, this is where it's going, telling the audience where it was going. But even the fans, the hardcore fans of DC, after Justice League, couldn't tell you where DC was going. So they couldn't tell the general audience, well, if you just wait, we got, I don't know where it's going. And it lost the general audience's interest. So they weren't going to the films. They weren't making money. And that's why the DCEU just continued to fail. Yeah, you had a Batgirl movie that got canceled eventually because nothing was making money. They were going to put it on HBO Max. You have a failed universe. Why are they going to put a failed universe movie that looks like crap by all accounts onto HBO Max where it's not going to make you any money to begin with after you spent $100 million on it? It was just madness. It was madness. Let's get back over to the comments. Got a few more here. He did nothing but Cape Crusader. Such a good spend of money. I don't know what you're saying there, Matthew. Critic Chris, Reeves Superman costume design, not to nitpick, but I love not overly blue or red. Yellow S on cape and cape not overly long that touches the ground. I believe Reeves costume can be modernized. Matthew, poor planning. It's a toss-up. Who did worse, DC or Star Wars under Kennedy? Oh, boy. Yeah. That is definitely a toss-up for sure. Matthew says, JJ left the Mission Impossible franchise? Oh, yeah, he did. That's right. He did Mission Impossible 3. And the one he didn't produce flopped. He also can't get a fourth JJ Star Trek made, and he's been trying for years. I'm of the opinion the fourth only happens if he directs it. Maybe. Probably. I don't know. I have no idea. Critic Chris, I admit friends and I went to Flash only to see Keaton's return as Batman, but came out thinking it wasn't as bad as people were hyping it up as. Honestly, I'm not a hater of the Flash. I actually enjoyed the Flash movie. CGI wasn't great. I'm actually not a hater of the it's not the Speed Force, but that the orb that they were in where we saw the Henry Cavill in there and the stuff like. They explained that was supposed to look that way. If that's what they were going for, that's fine, because you could see the CGI in other places looked fine. Not fine, but looked better. If that's what they were going for, that's what they were going for. But like the hospital scene, that was rough. That was bad. That was some bad CGI. And I'm the kind of person that really, really bad CGI can pull me out of a movie. That really pulled me out of the movie, 100%. Critic Chris says, I love the Ted Cord Blue Beetle costume briefly seen on background. And Matthew says, I thought the Reeve cameo was bad, though. I love the idea of Slater, Supergirl, and him being in a story together, though. I don't think that was bad. People sit there and act like it was like a disgrace to Christopher Reeve and Slater. It was not a disgrace to either of them. It did nothing. It didn't slap them in the face. It didn't disgrace their legacy. It did nothing to hurt their legacy. It did nothing to them. I don't like people. I'm sorry if you feel this way, but I'm sorry. That is absurd. It is absurd to think that it did anything. It was a cameo. Yes, it was AI generated, artificially generated. That's fine. I get that. And people can be mad about that. But they had the rights to the likeness, from what I understand. If they did not, they would be sued. And if, from my understanding, they are not sued. They have not been sued. So that's where I stand on it. I don't know. As EL says, I personally kind of like the brighter suits of these kind of heroes. I feel it makes them look like mighty, legendary, powerful. I don't know, something about it. I thought you were going to say Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for a second. T.O. Jones. James Gunn's Superman costume is good in the colors. It's just those lines aren't doing it, and the underwear looks like a diaper. I like his Superman suit. I do. I'm going to reserve my final judgment for the movie, though. Behind the scenes looks, you can't judge from leaked photos. People need to stop doing that. Like, we just saw behind the scenes photos of The Thing on the Fantastic Four set. You can't sit there and judge that from behind the scenes. That's just absurd. It looks terrible. I'm not sitting here saying the Fantastic Four movie's going to be terrible. Look at The Thing. Like, you don't sit there and do that. Let the filmmaker make the film. Let him make the film he's trying to make, and then judge it when it's completed. People need to stop. I'm not saying you're doing that, T.O. I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just voicing my opinion on others out there who are sitting there making these claims like, oh, it looks so bad. Like, come on, people. Come on. Matthew, it looked 2D to me, though. Bad CGI. Talking about Christopher Reeve. Whatever. Yeah, T, I love everything outside the shoulder and sleeve lines. But like I've said before, I'm always open, asking as the movie's plot and writing is good. As you know, Mr. Terrific looks 100 amazing, though. Critic Chris thought costume in the Flash looked better than version by Snyder. All right, so where did I leave off? I don't even remember where I left off now because I'm lost. Oh, that's right. So we got through all of the crap with the DCU. Warner Brothers Discovery comes in, and things get canceled. Batgirl gets canceled. Things like that happen. We are now to the point where all these films come out and they're just critic failures, box office failures. What is David Zaslav supposed to do? Sure, you have Henry Cavill, or not Henry Cavill, you have The Rock, whose film is about to come out, and he's like, hey, I want to take over DC. That's my Rock impression. I'm not very good, sorry. But he wants to take over DC. There was an article that came out from the Wrap. The plan was to have, this was Dwayne Johnson and his $7 production company's way of trying to strong arm their way into a position that Zaslav was looking to fill. According from the report from the Wrap, the plan was to have Hiram Garcia be the face and head of DC, while $7 production would be the production house behind him in the films. So what they were trying to do is The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, was trying to get his production company and those in charge of his production company to take over the DC Films division of Warner Brothers Discovery. The idea was Black Adam. They thought Black Adam was going to be phenomenal. They thought it was going to be fantastic. They thought it was going to be amazing, because that's what Dwayne Johnson thinks. Everything he does turns to gold. So he thought this was going to happen. He also heard the fan cry, the Henry Cavill Superman. He heard it at San Diego Comic-Con. He heard it here. He heard it there. So he worked with, Michael DeLuca, Paul Abdy at Warner Brothers, the producers over at Warner Brothers. He worked with them. They talked to Cavill, said, look, we want to get you in a cameo here and there. People really want this. Let's get you in some cameos. We'll get you first in Black Adam. We're going to get you in a cameo in The Flash with these upcoming movies because we want to use you more. The Rock wants to do more with DC. We think he's going to get a hold of DC. He's going to really run with this. Things are going to happen. If he gets this, we're going to go full steam ahead. Cavill says, all right. So he has a couple cameos left on his contract. He has a couple of appearances. He gets paid for these appearances, whatever it was. He does these appearances. He gets paid for them. These one-off appearances. Black Adam, he gets paid to do The Flash, and he does them. And that's fine. He gets paid for those. Because of this, there's this discussion with Dwayne Johnson, with Cavill. Now, Cavill and Johnson's management team are the same team. Henry Cavill was managed by Dwayne Johnson's ex-wife. And at the time, they were like, you need to announce that you're back. That's going to boost up ticket sales. It's going to boost excitement. People are going to want to come back. And that's going to push Warner Brothers to say, look, we got to keep pushing forward with this. It was all a ploy. They played Henry Cavill. The Rock, Danny Garcia, $7 Productions, whatever you want to call it, played Henry Cavill. So Cavill played along. He announced that he was back. This wasn't Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers didn't know that he was going to do this. He announced that he was back. He wasn't lying. He said he was back in Black Adam and that he had big plans, because they did have big plans. Cavill wasn't aware that David Zaslav wasn't going to hire The Rock and his team to continue forward. But that's what happened. The Rock played Henry Cavill. And that whole thing that happened was unfortunate. It shouldn't have happened that way. But The Rock was trying to muscle his way in. And it didn't play out like The Rock wanted. And because of that, here we sit. James Gunn gets hired. And look, I like the James Gunn, Peter Safran hire. You know what happened? They hired James Gunn and Peter Safran. Peter Safran, James Gunn, we're honored to be the stewards of these DC characters we've loved since we were children and look forward to collaborating with the most talented writers, directors, and actors in the world to create an integrated, multi-layered universe. Hell yeah. Why not? But do you see the DCEU from its conception in 2013 to this point? There was just so much backstabbing. There was so much of just multiple directions, multiple people trying to pull the universe in one way or another. It's unfortunate that Snyder got played back when he did. There's no excuse for that, what John Berg and Josh Whedon did to everybody back then. Kevin Tujihara, the head of Warner Brothers at the time, president of Warner Brothers at the time. The way they all handled everything back then, unacceptable. Then what Walter Hamada and how he handled things when he took over and handled DC properties under AT&T. I mean, he did the best he could, but he wanted to do his own thing, and rightfully so. He had the right to do that. He didn't need to hire Snyder. He didn't need to do anything. He wanted to do his own thing. It didn't work. It didn't work. David Zaslav came in and he let it play out a little bit. And he wanted to see what The Rock was going to do, how Black Adam was going to do, what his plans were, and it didn't work either. So he decided, you know what? I like what these guys are saying. I like what they have lined up and what they want to do. I'm going to hire them. And unfortunately, because of that, this man here got caught in the crossfire. But everybody blames James Gunn that Henry Cavill got fired. He wasn't fired. And it's unacceptable to blame. Again, that toxicity that I said started when the fans were weaponized by Ray Fisher back in 2020. It built and built and built and built and built, and it is at an all-time high today. But every little thing that happens, instead of the fans turning around, sitting back and taking a look and saying, you know what? Let's look at this logically. Let's look at the real story. Let's look at what actually happened. Instead of doing that, they automatically see James Gunn head of DC, Henry Cavill no longer Superman. It's all James Gunn's fault. Well, no, the story is much bigger than that. It's unfortunate James Gunn is the one that had to announce that they were moving on from Henry Cavill. It should never have gotten to that point. Henry Cavill's team should not have encouraged him to announce that he was coming back when there was nothing truly lined up. But that's what happened. Things just get out of hand all the time with all of this. And there are fans that just can't accept that, you know what? There are certain people that are at fault. It's not James Gunn. It's not David Zaslav. It's these people over here, or it's these people over here. And sure, James Gunn isn't perfect. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to mess up. Look, I don't think it was the best move to keep the Peacemaker stuff included in the DCU. It wasn't. This is his announcement. After being hired, January after they were hired, they announce this lineup. Superman Legacy, The Authority, The Brave and the Bold, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, Swamp Thing, Creature Commandos, Waller, Booster Gold, Lanterns, Paradise Lost, as well as Peacemaker Season 2. I don't agree with keeping Peacemaker in the list of things. I don't think that was smart. But this is an interesting lineup. Before we get into that, let's take a look. I got a crap ton of comments I want to look at here. Whole bunch. All right. Oh boy, I got a lot of comments here. All right. I see my review, Aaron Fisher. How's it going, man? Hello. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad you're here. All right. You say, but it was the studio, meaning Zaslav, who told him to announce he was back. Cavill made that very clear in his departure message. He never said Zaslav told him to announce he was back. He said Warner Brothers, which would have been DeLuca and Abdi. which were part of Warner Brothers producers, who were on the side of The Rock and $7 Productions, because they were all working as a team trying to get The Rock to run DC Productions. It wasn't Zaslav, I can tell you that much. Warner Brothers told Cavill to announce he was back. Nobody goes to the movie for just 5-second cameo, and Black Adam was the highest grossing film since Aquaman. It was going in the right direction. I don't disagree that, yes, it was the highest grossing film since Aquaman. Was it going in the right direction, though? It's to be seen. I mean, you take a look at all the other films that were going on at that time. Like, come on, man. Like, that's tough. That's tough to say, because even after what you had Black Adam, and then you had Shazam, and then you had The Flash, and then you had Blue Beetle, then you had the next Aquaman that just dropped. You can't say it was going in the right direction at that time. You then say everything after Black Adam bombed, after everything Black Adam bombed, after they let Cavill go. You can't correlate letting Cavill go to everything bombing. I'm sorry, there's no correlation to that. The general audience, like, there's no correlation to that. I don't know how you can correlate letting Cavill go to Blue Beetle bombing or to Aquaman 2 bombing. Like, I don't get where the correlation lies there, because there's no expectation from the general audience that they see Aquaman that Henry Cavill is going to be in it, or Blue Beetle that Henry Cavill is going to be in it. Where do you get that? That's just wild to me. Safran was a producer on all the films that bombed. Okay. There's many producers on films that bomb. Kathy Kennedy's been on films that bombed, as well as films that have been successful in her history. It happens. She's still considered a fantastic producer. You understand that producers aren't always the ones that make every decision, right? Sometimes producers are just the money men. Sometimes the producers are just the men who sit there and say, hey, I'm going to work on the marketing. Sometimes producers are involved with the creative process. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're involved with just casting. Do we know what Peter Safran was doing as producer on those movies? Do we? I don't. And I'm not going to sit here and defend him and say, oh, absolutely, he should not be held accountable for any of those failures. I'm not going to say that at all. He should be held accountable for those failures. But what I'm saying is, you can't sit there and say, well, because those movies failed, he's a huge failure. Everything is blamed on him. He shouldn't get another chance. That's not how that works. No, he's absolutely should be held accountable for it, but that doesn't mean he shouldn't get another chance. Again, Zack Snyder has been director and producer on films that have failed. Did you see Rebel Moon? Those movies are complete failures. He's going to get more chances. Did you see Sucker Punch? Complete failure. He's getting more chances. Directors, producers, they have failures all the time, and they get more chances. And you say it is Zaslav. Okay, man. Like, say what you want. You can say what you want. You can say what you want. You can believe what you want. Let's just say it is Zaslav. For the sake of this continuing, we'll say it was Zaslav. We will say Zaslav told Henry Cavill. Zaslav went and called up Henry Cavill and said, hey, Henry Cavill, hey, buddy, we're best friends now because I'm the head of Warner Brothers Discovery, and you and I are best friends, and I get close with all of my actors. You know what, buddy? I want you to go on your Instagram and announce you're back. That's what I want you to do. He puts on his cool sunglasses like Zaslav does. I want you to announce you're back. That's what I want you to do. For some reason, I feel like he would talk like Jack Nicholson when he was younger. And that's what he does. He goes and tells Henry Cavill to announce he's back on Instagram, because that's the way that Zaslav would tell him to do it. Come on now. If Zaslav told him to announce he was back, he wouldn't tell him to do it on Instagram. They would make a big announcement through the trades, through big trades, through the reports. Come on now, think about that. You know what Henry Cavill did was all a ploy by The Rock, by Paul Abdi, by Michael DeLuca, whatever their names are. That was all their ploy because they were all working together to try and get The Rock to get the power to run DC Films, because Abdi and DeLuca were going to have a lot of pull at that point in time. You know that as well as I do. Don't sit there and say that Zaslav would call up Henry Cavill and say, go on your Instagram and make a post saying that you're back as Superman. Get out of here. There would have been a huge deal if Zaslav was like, look, we want to announce you back as Superman. Let's make this a big deal. You know that as well as I do, man. Like, come on. Come on. Like, you're talking about the CEO of a major picture studio. He's not going to have an actor make that announcement via Instagram. It's something that could be as monumental as that to push the DC universe, their biggest IP at the time. He's not going to do it that way. Come on. Come on. Oh, man. Oh, man. And then, but it was the studio where I went somewhere else. Where am I at here? I'm lost. Geez, there we go. I'm sorry I'm skipping everybody else's comments, but I want to get through these ones from Aaron Fisher here. Zaslav said they were going to focus on the Trinity. Look at that lineup. Did I miss another comment? You also said you fail upwards at Warner Brothers. All the worst performing characters and producer kept their jobs. Jeff Johns didn't keep his job. Walter Mott is gone. John Berg isn't anywhere to be found. James Gunn had a successful television show called Peacemaker. That's not failing upwards. He had a successful show. I don't know what you're saying. Peter Safran. Look, producers, bad producers, producers who fail, have successes. They stick around at studios. That's what producers do. It's how it works. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. This is getting out of hand. Let me get back to let me get back to what I was saying. So back on this here. So this lineup is really interesting because this is chapter 1 called Gods and Monsters. Gods and Monsters, which I think is really cool. And this isn't even, James Gunn even stated, this isn't going to be all of chapter 1. Chapter 1 is going to be larger than this. It's going to be bigger than this. In chapter 1, what they did was they showcased the different types of tones, the different types of areas that they're going to explore. You got Superman, the heart of the DCU, like the heart. It's going to be more heartfelt. You got the Authority, which is more like otherworldly and spacey type of thing. You got the Brave and the Bold, more grounded, like Batman. You got Supergirl, which is going to be similar to Superman, I think, but the Woman of Tomorrow movie is sounding like it's going to be like possibly like the comic, so it could be spacey as well. Swamp Thing, I mean, that's going to be more horror aspect, we're thinking. Creature Commandos is animated. Waller, we're hearing, is going to be dark and gritty and grounded. Booster Gold, a comedy. Lanterns, a buddy cop type of thing. And Paradise Lost, which we're really not 100% sure, but I mean, it's going to be like Themyscira, and it's going to be taking place in the past, so it's going to be like a period piece. So what the whole idea with this announcement was to give the fans and everybody an idea of all the different types of tones, all the different types of things that they're going to be doing within the DCU with chapter 1. Again, this isn't everything in chapter 1. This was just kind of like, here's a broad stroke of, here's all the different types of angles that we're going for with the DCU. Sure, there's going to be more. There's going to be things that we haven't announced yet that are going to be coming, and you're going to see that in the future. But here's just a taste of all the different areas and different places we're going to explore. And that's what's so cool and exciting about it. Again, this is a future that we've not seen with the DC films or universe ever on film. Like, we've never seen anything this exciting before. Sure, when I go back to it, like, I'll pull this up. 2014, this was our lineup. This was our lineup. And I'm not knocking it. I was excited. I thought this was great. Zack Snyder at the helm of most of this. I was excited. This was going to be cool. But you look at that, and then you look at this. You look at that, and you look at this. There's definitely a grander vision today than there was in 2014. In 2014, they had a very, very singular idea, a story that had a starting and a very quick finishing point. Today, this is a universe that is massive, that is expansive, that is growing, that is already lived in. This one, again, I liked it. I loved it. I wanted more of it. But it didn't seem like it was that expansive. Like, it just didn't seem, and maybe it was because it was just like, we know Batman vs Superman, we knew Justice League, Part 2 was going to be Snyder. Wonder Woman was going to be taking place before all this, and it was kind of like, okay, Flash was going to be in between the Justice Leagues. Like, everything just felt so tight in its own little place, like one, boom, 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 right with each other. Again, not a bad thing. That's what people expected back then. But this is so large, so expansive, and there's more to it than just this. It's so exciting because it's like I keep saying, the future is brighter now than it's ever been for DC when it comes to films, because there is so much out there. There's so much that we've never, ever seen that's planned. There's a plan like we've never seen before, and that's what's exciting. That's what leaves me hopeful for DC. And I get it. I know, Aaron, if you're still listening, I get that you don't like James Gunn. That's your opinion. You can have that opinion. You don't need to like James Gunn. You don't need to like Warner Brothers. You can hate David Zaslav. But at least get your facts straight. At least understand that, look, Cavill was not fired. The Rock and everybody over there played Henry Cavill. Abdi, DeLuca, they played Cavill. James Gunn did not fire Cavill. James Gunn, you're using him as the means for your anger. You're to take out your anger on the Henry Cavill situation. So stop saying James Gunn had fired him. He didn't. James Gunn was hired to come in and start a fresh DC universe. I said it earlier. I agree. Keeping Peacemaker, I think, was not the best idea. It's not a good idea. He says he has a way in. I'm curious. I'm interested to see how he does it. If it works, great. But I don't think it was the best idea. But we'll see how it works. I've said that from the very beginning. We'll see how it works. But he did not fire Cavill. It's not his fault that Cavill is no longer at DC. There are many things that happened why Cavill didn't have a contract prior, everything like that. We talked about it this show earlier. If you weren't around, I'm sorry. I'm not going over it again. James Gunn is doing his job. You don't need to like him. There's no vendetta. There's no secret society at Warner Brothers trying to destroy the fandom, trying to destroy Zack Snyder. Warner Brothers just wants to make money. That's the job of a studio, is to make money. They realized that the DCEU was going nowhere. They decided the DCU, James Gunn, Peter Safran, was the best choice to make it happen, to make them money. This lineup here, this chapter 1, is what they're going to test it with and see if it happens, see if it works. It may not work. I think it will. You may not think it does. It's the general audience that's going to decide that. It's not us fans, believe it or not. It's the general audience that's going to decide it. That's the exciting part. All right, before I get out of here, because I got to start wrapping this up, I got to get to bed. I got work in the morning, guys. Let's get through some of these comments. I can't get through all of them because there's too many of them, but thank you all for joining for sure. All right, some of these comments. 1, 2, 3, 4. 8, 9. We'll go. We'll go from T.O. Jones. You said if Gunn fails, Warner will just sell off the character. He won't sell off the characters. No. License the characters, license the IPs for other studios. Maybe they won't sell them off, but they'll just go back to what they used to do. Batman movies, Superman movie here, maybe a Green Lantern movie here. They just won't do a connected universe. That's pretty much what will happen. Matthew says you can do a good job producing something and the end product not be good or all that great. It happens. Exactly. Producers can't be held accountable for all the failures of a movie. They just can't be. Again, there's so many jobs of a producer. Heck, you could be called a producer and just be somebody who bought tennis shoes for somebody on set. That's a little exaggeration, but there are so many jobs of a producer. It's absurd. Tio says, at the end of the day, there's more casuals than comic book fans. I can bet you all right now, casuals know more about Pedro Pascal, Mr. Fantastic than Corn Sweat Superman. Very true. And marketing is going to be key for this Superman movie. I say it all the time. This marketing is going to be key for Superman for the success of this movie. How DC markets this movie is going to be huge. And the one thing that Warner Brothers never did well was market the DCEU. Their marketing was horrendous, always horrendous. Compared to Marvel's marketing, it was always terrible. So I'm hoping under DC Studios, their marketing gets better. Resident Justice asks, who is left at Warner Brothers at leadership level from the previous regime besides Safran? The main culprits are all gone. Thank you. Thank you. Tio says, man, Harrison Ford's Red Hulk has more hype than Corn Sweat Superman. They should have just given another character to start the DCU and gave the big man a rest. How many times has DC failed Supes? Tio, boy, the Authority is a mix of Invincible with the boys. Do you read comics? Are you asking me? Yeah, I mean, they're a mix of Invincible with the boys. Do you read comics? Yes, but they're from outer space, so they're not from here. I'm not very versed in the Authority, so don't get me wrong. When they announced the Authority, I have heard of them, and I'm going to be completely honest. I've never read an Authority comic. I've heard of the Authority, but I never read an Authority comic. But I know they're from outer space, if I'm not mistaken. Please, I'm pretty sure. Now you're going to make me look like an idiot. Damn it. Pretty sure they're from outer space. DWA98, people wanted things other than Batman. Well, here you go. The slate has nice variety. Thank you. Resident Justice, a lot of hate towards James Gunn and the DCU comes off as incredibly childish and pedantic. Agreed. DC has always been more than just one tone or one specific character. Each project should try to feel unique and different from one another. Agree, Resonant. Matthew says, I'm interested in Superman and Supergirl, depending on how it's written, if they respect the audience and the characters. Yes. Critic Chris agreed with Resident Justice. Hate for the DCU. T.O. Jones, Resident Justice, but does not James Gunn know that or understand that, or is he going to make Superman a dick joke boy? He's not going to make Superman a dick joke boy. He's not going to. He understands that. James Gunn is not a one-note writer. He understands how to write things. He understands this. Man, the comments are rolling in. I do got to get out of here, guys. I'm going to give it a few more minutes. I'm going to jump down through some of these comments. One thing that has me excited about the new DCU, this is from Fandom Man, is the fact that there is care and thought behind what is being made compared to the previous regions. I like the DCU, but it didn't have me hooked. Yeah, I mean, I get that. That's the sentiment of a lot of people. The DCU just didn't have a lot of people hooked. People liked aspects of it, but people were not hooked by it. The DCU, the fact that there is care and thought behind it is, again, another big aspect of why people were excited. Fandom Man also says, I'm hyped for this Superman film because after I graduate high school next year, this movie drops. Yeah, that's going to be exciting. T.O. Jones, Resident Justice Fair. He agreed with that. He also says, for now, James is single-celled organism. He has much to prove and grow. He better live up to the name DC. All right, I know there's a lot of comments here. I want to thank everybody here. DWA says DC's potential is incredibly high, and there's so many things that have never been explored. Again, everybody, thank you so much for watching. This was a great episode. I want to know in the comments, if you weren't watching live, let me know in the comments what you think about all this. Aaron Fisher, thank you for joining and discussing and having at least a little bit of a discussion with me. That was great. And if you end up doing a live, if you see this, maybe I'll jump on and have a discussion with you. Look, we can have a discussion. You see, I would love to just get on your show or you come on my show. It doesn't matter. We can have a discussion. It's fine. It's okay, buddy. It's okay. But if you don't know, I do shows Mondays as well. This coming Monday, July 2025 Movie Mayhem. Who comes out on top? July 2025 is going to be nuts when it comes to movies. It's going to be crazy for sure. So we're going to talk about that as well as other news stories. My Monday shows are not just one single topic. We talk about multiple news stories that are going on over the past week. My Thursday shows typically just want to handle one topic. We really just focus on one topic. But my Monday shows, we talk about kind of newsworthy topics that are going on. So make sure you join us. Those are a little earlier in the day, in the evening, like 6-ish p.m. Eastern time. So make sure you check us out then as well. But again, thank you all so much for checking in. The Fandom man says, have a great night, dog. You too, man. Have a great night. Everybody, thank you so much for, checking in, stopping by, whatever it was. It was a great discussion, and I'll catch you all later.